Hi everybody, thanks for making it today. This is day one of psychological exploration of Nazi and fascist regimes. I know when you were registering for this, you probably thought this is a mouthful. Do I want to be getting into this? I'm really glad you did, because this is part of the university's push to have more interdisciplinary courses. So I actually collaborated with some of the professors in the psychology department, and we put together a course that's looking at history through a psychological lens. So not only are you going to understand what these people were doing, but you're hopefully going to learn more about how they were thinking so that you can better understand why they did what they did and how this affects us today. And also, the background of my presentation is gray, because that's where I'm hoping to get you to before we even start the course. I need you to be in a gray area, because we are not looking at this from a neutral lens, just based on how we've been in society. I mean, even today, there's still neo-Nazi resurgences, Nazism and fascism. They're incredibly negative and only looked at from the more of an enemy perspective, especially in America. And I need you guys to get to a point where we can look at what they were doing as people and not bringing in our preconceived notions of who they were and what they did and why they did it, so that hopefully we can understand more about the person that they were and how this affected history and us today. And so, in this course, we're going to be answering a lot of different questions, but the three main focuses that I want us to have are: what social factors intertwined with politics to create the foundation upon which Hitler and Mussolini could rise? So, a lot of times when we have our basic overview history courses, and I'm sure you all took in high school and maybe even earlier in your collegiate career, we're just covering what happened once Hitler and Mussolini got into power. Or we're just covering their roles in World War II. We're not even looking at how they rose to power, the kind of person that they were, or even before they were born, how was their country primed for them coming to power. Because that's key in understanding why they did what they did and how this affects us today. And then we also need to be focusing on Hitler and Mussolini, but also how does accidental presentism affect our analysis of the time period? So, does anybody know what presentism is? No? Tim?
It's a type of, it's when people assume that the present era is the best time period there is.
Right, you're spot on. So it's basically, it's something that a lot of historians fall into accidentally, and it's definitely a fallacy that needs to be avoided, but a lot of people aren't super aware of it. So it's basically bringing our own bias into the historical sources that we're looking at. So when we're reading, say, like Hitler's Mein Kampf, we're looking at it from our present values, from our present society, with our current economic state, and we're not fully understanding the context that it was created in. And if we're not fully understanding the context that it was created in, then we aren't going to fully understand the effect that it had on the country at that time. And we also need to be worried about bringing presentism into our study of history, because we're corrupting the field when we do that. And obviously, if you're in this course, you care about the field of history. I would hope so. And that's going to be key in this course. Let's see. And I think I shared the wrong PowerPoint with this one, but the other question is supposed to be, how can we respond to questions such as, what would you have done? Because that's a very dangerous question to ask a historian, because that's automatically looping you into falling into presentism, because you honestly cannot answer questions like, what would you have done? Because I cannot tell you how many times I've had conversations with people who know my field of study and say, well, if I had been alive back when the Nazis were in power, I would have fought back. And while that is a very heroic sentiment, it's also not something that we can make in good conscience, because there's no possible way that you can know how you would have acted, because we can't really answer what we're going to say if, say, we have a gun in our face. Or what if we were raised under like a Nazi general and indoctrinated with this? So it's kind of closing ourselves off to the multiple avenues of history, and it's not being fair to these incredible historical figures. Not saying that Hitler and Mussolini are incredible historical figures. I do not stand behind their actions. But it's very important that we recognize what factors combine to create their actions. And so, going over the required reading, I've assigned The Rise and Fall of Adolf Hitler. This is by William L. Shirer. He also wrote The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And I really like this book because it is a very comprehensive outlook of Hitler and his life. And what a lot of people don't understand is that dictators don't just appear out of nowhere and suddenly take total power. That's not how it happens. This is a slow, gradual process. He actually tried and failed to gain power several times, but a lot of us look at him as like this indomitable figure who suddenly rose to power and then suddenly died, leaving history in shambles. But that's not how it worked. He actually had an evolution of his goals over his lifetime. He tried to get into power and then failed. And people in power, this was not just him forcing his way in. There were actually people in power who supported him and did not see what was happening until it was too late. And Shirer covers that really well in his book. This is actually available on the library's website as an ebook, so you don't have to buy it, as I put in the syllabus. And then the other book that I've assigned to accompany this is Mussolini by R.J.B. Bosworth. This is a book that was key to me in my undergraduate study, and I think it's really crucial that you guys be reading this. I've been very careful as to keep the reading assignments short because the focus on this class is going to be discussion, because I want to hear you guys talking about this stuff. And if it's going to be psychological as well as historical, I have to know what you're thinking. And so this is mostly going to be response-based rather than you taking in vast amounts of information and then trying to figure out what to do with it. Because I don't want to be another one of those classes. So Mussolini is really important to read alongside The Rise and Fall of Adolf Hitler because what I like about what Bosworth did here is he incorporated Hitler and Mussolini's relationship because Mussolini was actually an inspiration to Hitler. But, as some of you know who have taken World War II classes, the situation kind of got reversed as Hitler grew more powerful, and Bosworth covers really well the psychological viewpoint of this, as Mussolini started to get jealous, and then started making irrational moves, and that escalates World War II, and so it's really key that you guys be following along with this stuff, because if you don't understand where Mussolini's coming from, it's going to make it a lot more difficult to understand where Hitler's coming from, and where it actually went in history. And then my final book, actually, can you pass me that right now? I'm not going to make you guys get this one because it's kind of a hard book to track down, but it is The Psychology of Dictatorship. I'm going to include it as handouts online. And it's pretty dated, but it's key because it's written by a psychologist who's actually present at the Nuremberg trials. And he includes some more statistical data about this. And what I want us to include here is not just looking at them from a historical perspective, but also understanding more about what they were thinking. And through these excerpts that I'm going to have you guys read, we're going to explore why they did what they did, and maybe try and understand more what that means today, and why Nazi resurgence groups have been able to come back in our current political climate, and understand, because if we can understand the past, then we're going to be able to better understand the present. Let's see here. And that's it. Thanks for coming, guys.